Good morning and a warm welcome from me, Karina van Wyk, and our three presenters, Kajubi Mukajanga, Eric Mugendi, and Vincent Ngete. Today's webinar is the first of 6 fact-checking webinars that Africa Check will be conducting over the next 6 weeks with the support of Facebook. These webinars are especially important in countries with upcoming elections like Tanzania, and as this is a time when having access to accurate information is crucial for voters to make informed decisions. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start. If time allows, there will be an opportunity for 1 or 2 questions after each session, and we will also end off with a question and answer session. Please type any questions you might have in the Q&A section. You'll have access to a question and answer session on your screen. If you do struggle to access that, you can also use the group chat, but preferably the Q&A. We'll try our best to look at all or most of these questions within the time allowed. The session is being recorded, and by attending, participants acknowledge this and provide their consent. Just a quick introduction. I'm the head of education and training at Trifax, and Trifax is Africa Check's training, research and information unit. And it's with great pleasure that I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Kajubi Mukajanga is the Executive Secretary of the Media Council of Tanzania. So many of you might know him. He has worked in media for 3 decades in different capacities as a writer, a media critic, editor, trainer, and a media executive. He has also been working in press freedom and freedom of expression related civil society for more than 2 decades. And he was instrumental in the formation of several press clubs in Tanzania and Uganda, the Association of Journalists and Media Workers, the Media Council of Tanzania, the Tanzania Media Fund, now the Tanzania Media Foundation, as well as the Independent Media Council of Uganda. He was president of the World Association of Press Councils, and he is an active member of the International Press Institute. Kajubi has also written or contributed to 14 books. I'm wondering, if he has any spare time left. This includes journalism training manuals, biographies, novels, and among several books he has authored are Reporting Elections in Tanzania, a manual for journalists. He's science and research reporting, and then also a book titled Tanzania Media Laws, a handbook for practitioners. So he's definitely the right person for any questions that you have related to reporting on elections, or any challenges that you are facing as a journalist. So welcome, Kajubi, and thanks for joining us. Then Eric Mugendi is the managing editor of PesaCheck. PesaCheck was established in 2016 to provide accurate and factual information around budgets and public finance. They were also the first fact-checking organization to specifically look at finance initially and financial matters, but they have since grown into broader fact-checking and verification of claims made both online and offline. Eric's work has been featured by the BBC, the East African and Quartz Africa. He has also spoken at events by BBC Africa, Facebook, and the US State Department on the spread as well as the impact of misinformation. In addition to his extensive editorial experience, Eric has written at length about technology in Africa, and he has also worked with organizations in 3 countries to track and combat misinformation during elections. Thanks, Eric, for also joining us. Then Vincent Ngete is Africa Check's Kenya Deputy Editor, and he has extensive experience in in-depth fact-checking, including fact-checking elections. Before joining Africa Check, he was an online sub-editor at the Nation Media Group, And in addition to data and fact-checking journalism, he has also covered stories with a focus on urban planning, the natural environment, and so forth. He holds an honours degree from Trent University in Canada, and he also has certificates in advanced sub-editing and data journalism from the Aga Khan University Graduate School of Media and Communications. Thank you, Vincent, also for joining us. Okay, in terms of I'm just going to quickly go through the program and what we have planned for today. So first up will be Kajubi, and he will be talking about the importance of fact-checking and accurate reporting, especially in the lead up to the election. Then we'll move on to Vincent, who will be discussing the dangers of false information and how it spreads, what journalists and fact checkers should expect before and during the elections. And here he'll speak about his personal experience covering elections in Kenya. And then Eric and Vincent will take us through some practical examples and case studies of fact checks that they have done. And then Eric will also talk to you about spotting false information and the questions to ask yourself before sharing information, publishing information, or forwarding a social media post, for example. And he'll also touch on preparing for covering and fact-checking the elections. And thereafter, we'll take a few final questions before we wrap up. So I'm going to hand over to Kajubi to take us through why accurate reporting is so important, especially at this time. Over to you, Kajubi.
Thank you very much, everybody, and hello, everybody. I guess what I have to do is just to kickstart this conversation. And so I will briefly talk about, as Karina said, the importance of accuracy and fact-checking. And then I'll talk a bit about fact-checking itself. And then I will share some ideas about what is emerging right now in Tanzania, issues emerging which might need fact-checking during this time. I have prepared notes, and I'm going to read from these prepared notes. I will elaborate where I think there is need, but otherwise I'll read my prepared notes. And here we go. The importance of accuracy and fact-checking. I hope everybody can hear me well. Okay, so there's no test of professionalism in journalism greater than that posed in the heat and pressure of a bitterly fought political election. It is the time when the impulse to manipulate media and to control information are strongest among ruling parties and political contenders running for office. It is equally a period of great challenge to journalists, be they editors or field reporters. In a democracy, elections represent an expression of political pluralism. They serve to demonstrate continued vigilance in the protection of multiplicity of cultural life and commitment to the defense of one of the most precious human rights, freedom of expression. This is where the media come in, to collect, analyze, interpret, and disseminate information on electoral processes and requirements, to avail contestants an opportunity to reach their audiences through different outlets, to provide the electorate with relevant information on contestants so that they make informed choices regarding political office bearers, and to report in depth the whole exercise so as to build the stock of what would finally help test the credibility of the electoral process itself. During elections, the media also serve as a glue to hold community together and enhances the ability and desire to listen to others. Whatever the orientation of the political agenda of any media outlet, there are overriding universal principles by which those in media ought to be judged. These are professional and ethical questions, which also relate to the influence of media outputs on individuals, groups, institutions, and communities. Information is crucial for people to be able to make informed and conscious decisions. Media provide platforms for the most efficient and effective communication. In line with the Commonwealth principles, free and democratic processes must include elections whose credibility cannot be doubted by any voter, candidate, or observer. The regard towards such credibility is very much in the hands of the media. As is often said, in journalism, facts are sacred. Getting our facts right is cardinal to a journalist's duty. During elections, this becomes quite critical. The public looks up to us to provide them information that will enable them make informed choices at the ballot box. Yet, as pointed out above, this is a time where competing interests jostle for a reporter's and editor's attention, cajoling, convincing, and even attempting to manipulate issues so that what comes out is coverage that favors the protagonist's position. Traditionally, in Tanzania, the public has a lot of faith in the media. Typically, when in an argument, one would purport to quote the media, and that would mean his alleged point of view is the truth. They would say, for example, even the radio announced the same last week, or it was even in the newspapers, and that would be it. The trust that the common mwananchi has on media borders on the naive, and media practitioners have to guard this trust jealously. Otherwise, we lose credibility, we become irrelevant, unneeded, and even undesired. The responsibility to ensure professionalism is maintained weighs heavily on the shoulders of not just editors and reporters, but media owners as well. Although the country has among the highest number of media outlets in the region, that is 45 TV stations, 264 online TV, 183 radio stations, 22 online radio, 148 web and online blogs, 2 online forums, and 229 newspapers, magazines, and periodicals. Most of these are small and capitalized outfits leading a hand-to-mouth survival. As such, their stability is shaky, and their practitioners face daunting challenges in maintaining professionalism and objectivity. To make matters worse, there is a dearth of advertising revenue. The government, its agencies, and parastatals are the leading advertisers, followed by the telecom companies. The shortage of advertising revenue means the media outlets are threatened as going concerns. When media outlets are weak economically, it becomes even more difficult to maintain professionalism. Yet professional we must remain always out. Let me look a bit now at fact-checking. In this digital era, fact-checking has become even more crucial. Technology has unfortunately made it so much easier to spread lies, fake news, and hate speech. Media practitioners are both inadvertent purveyors of it and victims. Alarmingly, having entered the election cycle, sponsored publications, propaganda sheets masquerading as newspapers and financed by political interests are hitting the streets with misinformation and hate messages. They carry content that is apparently intended to hurt the reputation of political opponents. Misinformation, mudslinging, fake news, and hate speech are the fodder of these publications financed by rival political interests. These publications are called, quote, strategic newspapers, unquote, by those behind them. The strategy here being to politically demolish your opponent by any means. This is all doing damage to the credibility of the media. Although the political process has a long history of misinformation and popular misperceptions, misinformation on social media has caused widespread alarm in recent years. For instance, it has been documented that a substantial number of US adults were exposed to false stories prior to the 2016 election, and post-election surveys suggest that many people who read those stories believed them to be true. Many argue that false stories played a major role in the 2016 election and in the ongoing political divisions and crises that have followed it. Editors should not allow any controversial information to be aired or printed without it being thoroughly checked. I know there is the problem of resources, which I alluded to earlier. But in this era of advanced communication technology, efforts should be made to multiple sources and limit the possibility of spreading false information. It is also important to note that this challenge does not only face small outfits, but large national ones as well, as was proved when the national broadcaster lifted a fake story about the President of the United States congratulating the President of Tanzania on his performance. For some of us, the news had all the hallmarks of fake information, but the broadcaster fell for it. There is, of course, the challenge of the legal regime and the monopoly of information in the hands of authorities who either do not want to release it or do not want to release it wholly, thus providing only what they want the public to hear. The Statistics Act elevates, quote, official information, unquote, to the level of something sacred, and challenging it can land one in trouble. Moreover, we all know that the Bureau of Statistics and other authorities do not necessarily and always have the wherewithal to provide all and accurate information. It actually might not be in their interests sometimes to do so. Still, good reporting requires that we, as much as possible, ascertain the facts we are putting before our audiences. Fact-checking, multiple sources, and pointing out that the information might not be official might help us. In any case, there is need to train our media practitioners how to identify fake news. The Media Council of Tanzania is making efforts to tackle this, and if successful, will work with an international partner to build the capacity of media practitioners to identify and reject false and inaccurate information, fake news, and hate speech. Reporters will be imbued with skills for ascertaining independent, verifiable, and accountable information. We are looking at an effective skills building approach which will build the critical thinking skills needed to make well-informed decisions in newsrooms. Skills training will focus on recognizing the markers of hate speech, misinformation, and disinformation, Capacity will be built for understanding the consequences of distorted and biased reporting on communities. And there will be learning on fact-checking and debunking techniques in addition to outreach and awareness raising to engage with the audiences. Now, a bit about fact-checking during these elections and issues which are emerging, which might need editors and reporters to fact-check. Both public and private media have a responsibility to conduct investigation into election processes and any activities by political parties and candidates. In other words, they have the responsibility of going an extra mile to trace and deliver the truth which the electorate can rely on to make reasoned choices. The media are expected to verify information before it is published, as this may be biased, politically damaging to some parties and their candidates, or even disastrous to the media outlet itself. It is advisable for the media to build confidence amongst the parties by reporting accurately and impartially so that the same are encouraged to release more information and do so regularly. The election has this election has an unprecedented number of candidates who have been barred by the electoral management bodies, both the Zanzibar Electoral Commission, ZEC, on the Isles, and the National Electoral Commission, NEC. Unfortunately, the EMB are not being generous with facts, which led to their decisions to bar candidates, and who are overwhelmingly from opposition, from competing for elected office. Even when their appeals were successful, the appeals of those who were barred were successful, the EMB have not volunteered information on why such appeals were successful. The way the electioneering is going on, it appears likely that there will be many court cases challenging the results due to the conduct of candidates during the whole process. Many allegations of foul play and an uneven playground are already being made. So let's look at some of the issues that are emerging as needing reporters to do proper fact-checking. These include: 1, disqualification of candidates. What are the grounds given in law on which a candidate can be disqualified from competing? What are the essential candidates' qualifications? Are rejections of candidates by the EMB based on internationally recognized and acceptable norms? What is international-based standards? 2, in a situation where the opposition has repeatedly thrown accusations at the electoral management bodies, EMB, are these accusations supported by what the law says? What are the facts? 3, allegations abound about electoral corruption. Instead of just quoting candidates, how does the electoral law define corruption during electioneering? What are the facts regarding the claims? 4, candidates' details. Where there is controversy about things like age, education, work experience, and so on, reporters need to check facts. Number 5, voter registration. A, were voters able to register easily? What facts point to this? B, is the register up to date? How many voters were registered? What are the facts that might be causing distrust regarding the number of voters? For example, we are told about 29 million voters having registered in this country of 55 million with a predominantly young population. Are these stated facts verifiable? C, verification of information on the register. What does the law say? Media should verify contested information, such as false names, incorrect names, names of non-eligible voters, multiple entries, etc., etc. D, fact-check complaints about eligible voters in Zanzibar being sent away without being registered. Number 6, check facts about media access to different political parties. This is a big issue in this election, bigger than it ever was. Very numbers of officials actually say and what is really happening on the ground. Is it verifiable? Yes, Karina? I have like 2 minutes.
Sorry, we lost you. I think we lost you there for just a short while. If you can just repeat the last sentence.
Okay. I was talking about voter register, and I don't know where you lost me, but probably I'll start at.
It was just a few words, so don't worry about it. You can continue where you feel comfortable. Yeah.
Okay, so on voter register fact checking, I talked about fact check complaints about eligible voters in Zanzibar being sent away without being registered. This is a big issue in Zanzibar, and it will probably go on until after the elections are over. Number 6, facts about media access to different political parties, because this is a big issue during these elections. It has never been as big as it is in 2020. Number 7, facts about different roles of officials. What does the law actually say and what is really happening on the ground? Is it verifiable? Number 8, counting of votes. Facts that might need checking include whether tabulation of votes can be openly tracked from polling station to intermediate centers to the final processing station, whether the entire counting process is observed by more than one group, whether there are no rules on what constitutes a valid ballot that favor one candidate or party, whether the announcement is done in the open and preferably before contending candidates or parties or their representatives. And 9, and finally, fact check on party policies and promises. Check the figures about the economy. The figures, every political party, every candidate is giving figures about the economy, about education, about infrastructure, etc., etc. Check these. Check the claims and promises made in the past. What did people promise in 2015? What did they promise in 2010? What did they say in the course of the years past? Verify examples that are given by candidates. Are they true? Or are they just a figment of the imagination? Journalism is about disseminating accurate information. We need to check and double check our facts. Fact-checking is central to the role of journalism in a healthy democracy. During elections, this becomes even more crucial because decisions which will affect people's lives might depend on what we publish. The importance of fact-checking cannot be overemphasized. Thank you.
Thank you, Kajubi, for sharing those insights. It's much appreciated. I see some of the attendees are asking whether they could have your notes or a presentation with the information that you shared. So we can discuss that afterwards and see if we can make that available. If anyone has a question for Kajubi, please type it in the Q&A using the Q&A function. Then just from my side, Kajubi, just 1 or 2 questions. In your opinion, what do you think is the biggest challenge that Tanzanian journalists face in the lead up to the election? And then also how can they address this challenge?
Frankly, I'm not sure what is the biggest challenge. There are so many challenges, and they affect media, different media outlets differently. But there are a number of challenges. And what can be done, I don't know. This is an ongoing discussion. So I will keep sharing ideas, and the council will keep sharing ideas, and we'll eventually see what is the best way to go. So the challenges include lack of resources, which lead reporters to depend on sources. This is a critical challenge in Tanzania during this election period. Media houses are passing through a very difficult economic situation. They don't have resources. And unfortunately, some editors, if not most, actually encourage reporters to depend on news sources. And by sources here, I mean actual contestants in the political process. Now, this is a big challenge. We all know that adage about not biting the hand that feeds you. So this is a real big challenge in terms of professionalism and objectivity facing us in this period. The second one, I think, which is quite important, is interference by media owners due to their political leanings or just plain raw fear of the incumbent. There is fear. The incumbent is really feared, and this fear is real. So there are instructions coming from head office, instructions coming from the media owner's office as to how editors should cover these elections, and this is a challenge, a big challenge. The third one is related to access to information. The electoral management bodies, political parties, and authorities do not always give information as required or when required. And journalists have to really go an extra mile to get some of the critical, crucial information in order to inform their audiences. And lastly, I think, is the lack of understanding among our reporters and even editors of the electoral law itself and the amendments to the Political Parties Act, recent amendments which were made, which are very critical at what they mean. This is a challenge. There is a lack of understanding of these. So we should continue discussing this, putting out seminars, trainings, etc., and engaging with the government, engaging with the media, and engaging with media owners in terms of how to deal with this. Yeah.
Okay, I see there are a few questions in the Q&A session, but we'll get to that. We'll try to get to that at the end of the session as we have to move on. So next up is Vincent, and he is going to talk about the dangers of false information and how it spreads, and also from his experience, what you can do as a journalist or fact checker before and during the elections, and what you can expect at this time. Thanks, Vincent. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I am really happy to be here today, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic of how false information spreads and the harm that it causes. So I'm going to have a small presentation, and I'm going to share my screen, and I hope that everyone will be able to see it. So I will be sharing it right now. I hope everyone can see it at this point. Can everybody see it? So
Yes,
yes, so
we
I
can.
did that. Okay, so once I know that, then I can now move into full screen mode. So right at the beginning, I am going to start by helping us understand where your false information would come from. At election time, claims made by politicians are very persuasive. Politicians are very, very influential people, not only because they are powerful, but because their words are widely reported, and they're also often wealthy individuals. So these are people who are increasingly influential, and people are more likely to believe them. We know, and this is putting things in a wider context. Right now, we have COVID-19, so I thought I'd mention that. A lot of fake cures and health scams. You have job scams. You've got people pushing hashtags on social media. I think Kajubi alluded to that. People spreading information online. Then you've got who is susceptible. Not everyone is equally susceptible. Everyone is to some extent vulnerable, but there's some people who typically are more susceptible to false information than other people. So in a paper that Africa Check participated in doing, together with other fact-checking organizations like Full Fact and Chequeado in Argentina, what we found was that people who are older have trouble recalling details and sources. People who have less education and older people may struggle to distinguish between fact and opinion. On social media, there's a lot of distraction. So once you read something, you move on to the next thing very, very quickly, which means that you are not necessarily critically thinking about it, right? And then people have biases due to motivated reasoning. So we tend to agree with things that confirm what we already think we know about the world. So this is some of the research that has been done on the spread of false information. So the Massachusetts Institute of Technology did this study in 2018. And what they found when they spread 126,000 news items over more than a period of 10 years, they looked at this over a period of 10 years, and they found that, to summarize it, false news spread 6 times faster than true stories for stories that reached at least 1,500 people, right? False stories were 70% more likely to be retweeted than truths. False political news traveled deeper and more broadly, reached more people, and was more viral than any other category of news. So this is what happens typically on social media. False news will typically have an advantage. When we are talking about how news spreads and the harm that it can do, we have to think about the wider political context of what is going on. So I got this quote from an author, journalist, and professor at the London School of Economics during a Global Fact 5, when all the fact checkers in the world met in Rome. And he made this point during his talk, that when Putin says there are no Russian soldiers in Ukraine, he is not saying the truth in an epistemological way. He's saying the truth does not matter. What does this mean? It means that sometimes there is misinformation that is spread despite us knowing obviously what the truth is, right? So when that happens, the point is not to tell you to change your perception of what the facts actually are. It is a challenge about whether it is possible to even know what the facts are. So there's a wider political and there's a wider game about how your world really is. And that's important to keep in mind. Sometimes it's not just about the specific issue people are debating about. So misinformation and disinformation have consequences that go beyond politics. And so we need to understand this. So polio, we are all familiar with polio. So it's a very infectious disease. And according to the World Health Organization, if it gets to the stage of paralysis, 5 or 10% of those infected will die, right? Among the paralyzed, 5% to 10% die when breathing muscles become immobilized. This is how polio kills you. So this is a 2018 map of what polio looked like in the world, right? And you can see in Africa, you can see the only orange mark is in Nigeria, and others are outbreak countries of circulating vaccine-derived polio. But the wild polio virus is in 3 countries, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And if we move forward to 2020, this is what has happened. So this is as of 15 September, very recently. You can see global wild polio virus 2015 to 2020. Nigeria is no longer endemic. So the countries in yellow are endemic. Nigeria got off this list only this year. And why is polio important? Why are we talking about it? Because Nigeria's vaccination campaign in 2003 failed because of misinformation about polio. And so from 2003 until 2020, they've lost 17 years. Their vaccination campaign failed, and they've lost at least a decade because the disease persisted for more than a decade than it should have. So this is a real world harm to people's lives, and it's important to consider this in an election. This is more relevant to politics and elections, and this cartoon is very important for us. So this was done by an Australian cartoonist called Kathy Wilcox, and you can see where we are as journalists and civil society. So civil society is the independent arbiter in the middle. We'll decide what's fake. No, we'll decide what's fake. And look at the politician. We'll decide what's useful to us. And in an election, you're going to get this. You're going to get politicians telling you this is fake news merely because they disagree with your reporting. So it's very important to know that the term fake news can also be weaponized and used against journalists for reporting things that are not in concert with what particular parties in an election would want. So this is an experience from the 2017 election. Probably people in Tanzania will know that in Kenya, the president has what they call the President's Delivery Unit. And what this office did in 2017 as the election approached was they created this website where they put all the government's achievements, right? So it was an official government website that listed the government's achievements to help people decide. As a journalist, what would confront you with this is you have to wonder where they got this information and whether it can be fact-checked or not. So for example, there's an example I have shown there. Over 2.43 million title deeds were registered between July 2013 to February 2017, an average of 694,286 title deeds per year. This is a huge increase from the 5 million titles that have been processed between 1963 and 2013. The government is on track to ensure that at least 3 million titles have been processed by June 2017. So here's the government saying, we've done this big thing for us, and therefore you should re-elect us. So do you believe a website that has been created just around the time of the election? How do you verify what they are saying? So typically, one of the best tools that is open to a fact checker is that, and one of the best secrets that are best to the fact that governments tend to produce information every day in the course of their work. The Treasury will produce reports, the Ministry of Health will produce reports, and a lot of times when they're producing it, the public demand for that information is not high. So the information will be produced and it will sit there until a certain point when we all need to verify what the government has said. Then we will all start looking for it. So it's very important for us to understand multiple sources of information, and also to understand that sometimes one piece of information can be reported in multiple places, so that you know where to look for it. If you can't look for it in place 1, you can look for it in place 2. So these are some of the sources typically where, as a fact checker, you will find information. So the National Statistics Agency in Tanzania, the UN, leading universities, central banks, government reports, reports tabled in parliament, peer-reviewed journals, experts, and fact checkers like us. Now, because we have had prior understanding of the fact that the government doesn't like its official statistics being criticized, I think we'll probably go over with that. We'll probably go over that with Kajubi. We'll talk about that. But one of the things that can help us is to have a good understanding of where the government's own sources are. So obviously the national statistical institutions, which have a range of data. The National Gazette. So this is what Kenya's Gazette, every law in Kenya is gazetted, but there is often data on government appointments, revenues, expenditures, money transfers, laws around budgets, organizations and professionals qualified to practice. So there's a lot of information in these places that we can use to verify things that the government might publish today. So for example, the National Gazette could have something like this. So finance bills, about taxes, division of revenue. So all these are very budgetary things, legal notices. So for example, this here is about coronavirus measures. So you can find it in the Gazette. So there are all these places where you can find all this information to counter check, you know, anything that a minister or a politician or someone running for election would want to say. Here's another thing you will get during an election. So as the election heats up, in Kenya, one of the things we saw in 2017 was we started seeing newspapers being faked, newspaper pages. So here you can see, for example, and I'm just going to come here and I'm going to use my my wand. I'm going to use my spotlight. So here you can see this is a political candidate, and he is holding a fake poster and a fake page of the newspaper. And this was the real page that was published that day by the official. This was the official page published that day by the newspaper. So someone has made a fake page about it. This is the kind of thing that you can expect to see as an election comes close, where they will just take something genuine and fabricate it and make a complete fake. So this is what you call manipulated content. In this case, or manipulated content, or fabricated content. So they've created it out of nothing, thin air. They've created a fake newspaper, right? So that's gonna happen. That can happen a lot in an election. And then we are going to see other things. So here, what I'm about to show you is a video. And the video is what you can see here. So this is a Facebook post. This was on May 24th this year, right? And so what Shaheen, the Honorable Jerry, is saying is that There's no lockdown because Tanzanians are celebrating after defeating Corona, right? And so there is a video. So I got the video here and I'm going to play it for you. This is what was going on. I hope that everyone will be able to. Can everybody hear? You can hear? Okay. It's a short video. I'll wait for it to end. Okay, so the president is celebrating the defeat of the coronavirus. Now, if we try to answer the question of where this actually happened, right? And I did it. So here's the same video. This is a journalist I'm sure you'll all be familiar with called Millard Ayo. So he's a big YouTuber in Tanzania. And he posted this story on October 22nd with the video. October 22nd, 2006. So this happened on October 21st, 2006. So one of the things you will see is this, where you have a video. It's not edited, it's not manipulated, but they'll tell you a whole wrong story about what's going on, right? A whole different story about what's going on. So it's going to be very convincing because it's not edited. It doesn't look fake at all. So it's very convincing, but the story is not right. So one of the things that helps in counteracting misinformation like this and disinformation like this is the skill of reverse image search, where we are able to search for a video and find out originally where it was published and what was going on at the time it was published. So this is another example that I am going to skip forward because I want to deal with it more at the end. Or I think, Karina, I should just handle it now as part of my example. What do you think?
You can. Yes, you can. If you if you think that that would work, you can use it as an example now.
Yes, I think it fits really well at this point. So
no problem.
So I think that this is something that is very, I'm sure that, even Tanzania has this experience of, politically there is violence, people are demonstrating, the police come out, the riot police, they come and they beat people. And these are very emotive pictures. So this is a Facebook post. So this is a Kenyan Facebook post. And you can see somebody has gone and posted on Facebook and said, I feel a lot of pain when I see many policemen beating one woman like this, even if she's on her knees in the name of curfew nonsense. This mother of someone, daughter of someone, and perhaps wife to someone has not committed any crime to deserve this. She's only got late after staying at the bus stage from 4 p.m. up to past 7 p.m. waiting for matatus. So Uhuru should be told that this police brutality against citizens will not stop. People will revolt. We are not tenants in Kenya. We are born here. Okay. Now, this man is saying that this lady got late because she stayed up until 7 p.m. This is clear daylight. This is not 7. So that should set something off. This appears to be daylight. But if we look a bit more keenly about this picture, move on to the next page. This is where I wanted to point this out because it shows what happens when the media gets it wrong. So the Star is a national newspaper in this country. National circulation. They take the same picture, security officers captured while beating residents of Mombasa. It's on their page even now, even today. Right? So they just lifted it from social media. What should they have done? Reverse image search with TinEye. So reverse image search is a technique where you search for a picture using a search engine. So you can upload the picture from your computer, or you can upload the web address of the picture, and it tells you when the picture was last published. So in this case, I'm getting very many hits on Reuters. First found May 16, 2016, May 16, 2016. I'm getting very many hits when I use TinEye. So you could have used Google, you could have used Bing, although Bing's not the most effective. You could have used Yandex. Yandex is quite powerful. You could have used Baidu. Baidu is very good for Chinese images. So if a picture has been taken in China and it's used in Kenya, Baidu can help you. So once we do this, we find that this is the original picture. Kenyan policemen beat protesters during clashes in Nairobi, Kenya, May 16, 2016. So it's almost 4 years ago, and this was happening during protests over the election commission, more than 4 years ago. So again, this will happen. The picture has not been manipulated, but you're being told a false story about it. The picture can also be manipulated. So we can add things to the picture, we can remove things in the picture, we can put people here who weren't there, and there are techniques for that as well. Okay, so you've done your fact checking, and you now have some corrective information. So your fact check is now ready to go out. So when is your correction most effective? So according to Walter and Tukaczynski, so these are professors of journalism. I have the paper, I can share it with you. Corrections are most effective when they are coherent. That means they are understandable and clear. People actually understand what you're trying to say. They understand where the error is, the false information, and the correct information. They understand them clearly when they are consistent with the audience's worldview. So if I am a very religious person and the fact checker is not religious at all, and so they're telling you that the holy water won't cure you, right? Because that person is not religious, you're not likely to believe them, no matter how compelling the evidence is. So you have to think about how the person you are reaching out to sees the world, right? So when you deliver the information that way, then you're more likely to succeed with corrections. It's much more powerful when delivered by the source of the misinformation. So if a cabinet, if a politician who is running for election in the constituency, I don't know, a nice Tanzanian constituency, in Dar es Salaam Central, or some place like that, he says something that turns out to be incorrect. If he himself says, what I said was wrong and this is the correct information, people are more likely to believe that. But if we try to correct the record and he does not correct the record, then people are less likely to believe us. If misinformation was attributed to a credible source. So these two are very much connected. These two are connected. If the misinformation is attributed to a credible source, in this case, a politician, people will believe it. And so it's harder for your correction to be believed. If misinformation has been repeated multiple times prior to correction, it's harder to believe. And there's a time lag between delivery of misinformation and correction. And this is where fact checking is important, because when we fact check, we're checking with experts, we're checking with the most reliable sources. So this can take some time, right? And in that time, the lie is out there moving forward. So how do we package the corrected information to give it some more strength and to enable it to spread as fast as the misinformation? This is very important for us to think about, because often fact checking takes time. So if you can correct it immediately, I mean, doing checking, verifying images often takes, takes minutes. So you can get this out there quickly. But for other fact checking, that may be a bit difficult. So you have to think about how you compensate for the time lost in fact checking. I tried to be very brief and comprehensive. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise them with me.
Vincent, thanks so much. While we're waiting for more questions, there is one that I'm seeing from Felix asking or saying that fact-checking at public meetings during the electoral campaign, how can a reporter do that considering the limited time and editorial pressure? Do you have any advice on tools or methods that you can use when there is limited time and you are fighting against a deadline?
Well, it's a very good question, and one that every journalist is going to come up against. One of the things that you can do as a journalist is to ask the politician for their evidence, right? So ask for their evidence. Ask them, where did you get that information? And if they reply, for example, they reply something like, because a lot of politicians will say, you're a journalist, that's your job. Or they will refuse to reply to you. You can always say that, the reporter or the newspaper, for example, if you're dealing with, Mwananchi or the Daily News or the Guardian, you can say, the Guardian asked Mr. So-and-so for the source of his information, but he had not provided it by the time we were going to press. So you're telling your reader, right? You're telling your reader that he said this, but as of now, there is no evidence to back it up. There's no evidence to back it up. So then what happens is you can publish a story after that. So once you hit your deadline, you can now publish another story that says that the politician said this, we asked him for his evidence, and he led us to this report, but the report does not prove what he said. Or there is no evidence of what he said. That can be another story published the next day. And because this is election time, there is a lot of interest in fact-checking stories. So you can take a little time. When you publish it, people will still read it. Because what's going to happen, remember that in an electoral campaign, politicians go saying the same thing everywhere. So they have one speech and they will use it. Today, they'll come to Dar es Salaam. Tomorrow, they're in Dodoma. Tomorrow, they're in Mwanza. They're saying the exact same thing, right? Often with a bit of change to suit the location. But if they're talking about how they have created jobs, they'll go and say, we've created 1 million jobs in Dar. Then they'll go to Dodoma and say, we created 1 million jobs. They'll say the same thing. So what will happen is, once your fact check comes out, he's still saying the same thing. So it's often still relevant. It's often still relevant in an election campaign because they're saying the same thing in many places. So you can take a bit of time to check it a bit more thoroughly, I think. And then often also what happens is once somebody says that if you don't have the time, if, for example, you're dealing with a radio program, for example, you're dealing with a radio program or you're dealing with a TV program, what happens is that if somebody makes a claim, you have a research team that is checking that. So if at the beginning of the program someone makes a claim, your team can be researching during the program, and then at the end of the program you can say, oh, by the way, you said this, we found the answer, this is not true. Or alternatively, if this is a program you're running every week, you can say, last time so and so came on the program and he said this, we have now checked it, it is not true. So that's the advice I would give.
There's one more in the group chat from Daniel, and he's asking, and I think it ties in with the answer that you just gave, Vincent. He's asking, what happens if I try to verify a claim and find that two government sources, for example, the Ministry of Education and the statistics body, what if they share conflicting information on a subject? How do you approach that as a journalist?
Very good, very good question. Because we've encountered this before. From 2018 to 2019, we were trying to fact check how many roads had been built in Kenya. And so the dilemma was the president's office was saying one thing, the treasury was saying another thing, and the Ministry of Transport was saying another thing, all different data. So we wrote to the Ministry of Transport to ask them, okay, you're the people who build the roads, can you tell us? And they wouldn't tell us. They wouldn't tell us. So in that case, the right thing to do is to say that we have checked all these sources and this is what we have found, and they are different, and lay them out, just lay it out. Say, I have gone to the Ministry of Transport, this is what I have found. I have gone to the government and this is what I have found. So well, for Daniel's question, if you're talking about the Ministry of Education and the statistics body, you do the same thing. You say the statistics body says this, the education ministry says this. Now, and just lay it out there. The reason I'm saying that is because, okay, we know in this case, the statistics body is likely to be the secondary source. I mean, it's education data, it comes from the education ministry, right? And the statistics body takes it from there. So for example, if you're doing, if the information you're looking for is how many children are enrolled in school, it's the ministry's job to count every year and submit that information. But I would not encourage you to get in the weeds of that. I would not encourage you to get in the weeds of saying, okay, we are going to believe the education ministry over the statistics body. I wouldn't encourage you to get mixed up with that and get involved. That's for them to sort out. You just come and say, these are the two public sources and they're different, and then ask them to comment and leave it at that. So, because then what you do, if you decide that you are going to, if you decide that you're going to start picking and choosing, then you are denying yourself and the public an opportunity for the relevant body to make the correction, to correct the record and say, this is right, this is wrong. That has to come from them. So that's what my advice would be in that situation.
Thanks, Vincent. We're going to move on to Eric now because as I mentioned, we'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible, and we also will have a short Q&A session as we wrap up. So I'm taking note of the questions as we go along. But I'm going to hand over to Eric now, and he will take you through one or two relevant or examples of fact-checking work that PesaCheck has done.
Cool. Good morning. It's good to be here. And as Karina mentioned, I am the managing editor of PesaCheck, which is a fact-checking organization that's based in Nairobi. And we started out doing fact-checking work in 3 main countries. So that's Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania in 2016. But this was mainly to look at issues on budgets and public finance and delivery of public services. And with time, we grew our focus into more general fact-checking. And one of the things that we were able to establish is a partnership with Facebook, where we get access to potentially false content on their platforms. And through this, we've been able to see a lot of potentially false content from the different countries we work in. And Tanzania has been very interesting because we've noticed that the false information isn't as prevalent on Facebook, but we've seen quite a lot of it on Instagram, which we found to be very curious. And so I'm sharing my screen. Please let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. So I'm going to look at verification and fact-checking during elections and how fact-checkers can help to prevent the spread of false information. So as I've explained, we started out as a public finance fact-checking organization, hence our name, because PESA is obviously Swahili for money. But now we've started looking at misinformation on messaging platforms, places like WhatsApp, and also on Facebook. And because a lot of times these false claims and this misinformation and disinformation, they tend to spread from the internet, from the online world, and then they cause offline harm. And because of that, it's become essential for us to respond quickly to this false information, and then also to see where the trends are and try to move as quickly as we can to fight this false information. So there's 2 main things that we do as fact checkers. There's the fact checking itself, and that's in the name of the work we do. So fact checking is looking at statements after they've been made. So looking at things that significant individuals have said or have posted or have published, and then getting expert input and analysis to give a conclusion to this information. So we say this information is true, this information is false based on this information. And that's what I mean by an adjudicated conclusion. And then verification happens in real time. So we tend to do this more in situations that are rapidly developing. So in instances like elections, for instance, where you have a lot of information being published or being shared, and the main thing that you're trying to do is to look at these individual pieces of information to determine the authenticity, so that you as a journalist or as a media practitioner can go ahead and make a decision on whether to run or to hold a story. So I'm going to look at a couple of examples of misinformation in Tanzania that we've seen. And these were done by Najma Juma, who's on the call. She's our fact checker in Tanzania. And this video, it's a really long, I think it's like, it's 14 minutes long, where this media outlet decided to go with a headline saying that Tundu Lissu has died. And Tundu Lissu, as you know, is the main opposition candidate in the upcoming presidential election. But if you actually listen to the video, they just go through the fact that he had been shot and he had to leave the country for treatment. And then now they were talking about his return to the country and the impact of his return and like what effect that would have in the political landscape in Tanzania. So if you look at it, if you look at the image itself, it has like a candle showing that people are trying to, because candles are generally associated with situations like funerals, and it even has a repeat Tundu Lissu in the image itself. So this is the thumbnail on the video. So if you look at the thumbnail, or if you look at the title of the video, you would think that the man has died, but he hasn't. And if you listen to the video, it actually doesn't mention his death at all. So we've seen situations like these where people try to employ clickbait, where they have a false headline, and they're trying to get people to pay attention to it because they know that the man in question is quite prominent and popular. So they try to sort of ride on the fact that this man is so popular. Let's plant a fake headline, but then the video itself doesn't really bring up any new information. And then, oh wow, okay, something just happened. Yeah, this is a fact check that we did. about that particular claim, and we found that a few days after the video was published, and they're talking about how how this whole situation played out, he was actually seen around the country. Like he had been to a couple of places during his campaign. So clearly he wasn't dead, but this story was making it sound like he had actually died. Then this is another one that we saw where it was a tweet from an account calling itself Barack Obama TZ. And it says, elect Tundu Lissu to be president of the Republic of Tanzania. And as far as this goes, this looks like it's Obama endorsing Tundu Lissu as a candidate for the election. But then if you look at the account, it doesn't have a verified check mark. The account itself disappeared a few days after this particular tweet was posted. And when we tried to dig and find it, we actually discovered there was even another layer of deception, because this was the account that had the tweet, and the tweet I think is still up, where it says, hello Tanzania, elect Tundu Lissu to be president. It has this image. This tweet also had the same image. And then you have this account of Bernard K. Membe, who is also a presidential candidate. And I think he was also foreign minister of Tanzania. And this account is actually fake. It's impersonating this guy. So you have an account that was previously impersonating Obama, which is now impersonating Bernard Membe, and who's a presidential candidate endorsing another presidential candidate. So if you see just how absurd the situation is, you sort of try to understand just how the whole misinformation landscape plays out. People will impersonate prominent individuals and try to use them to spread false information. And then this one, I think Vincent touched on it a bit, where there was mention of the US reacting to President Magufuli's treatment of Tundu Lissu again. As you can see, there's a lot of misinformation around this guy, because he's quite popular and he's quite prominent, and he had received a lot of coverage. And so what this YouTube video was saying is that the US ambassador had expressed some dissatisfaction to the government of Tanzania over their treatment of Tundu Lissu. And as a result, one of the things we're saying was that Tanzania could start facing sanctions from the US, which is quite serious, but nothing like this had happened. And as a direct consequence of this, if someone saw this video, they would probably start to think, well, maybe the government should do something about this situation and try to avoid the impending sanctions from the US, because we've seen what those can do to countries like Iran and North Korea, where people are unable to access like basic services. And if you look at the economic might of the US and the things that Trump has been doing, this doesn't seem as absurd. I think that's one of the things that the Trump presidency has done. It's led to situations where stories that we would previously dismiss and say, well, that couldn't possibly happen, actually start to seem plausible. And as a result, this has had some impact on the upcoming presidential election, because you're starting to paint certain candidates, or the government in this case, in a certain light. And then you've also seen other types of misinformation where, for example, this was a screenshot shared on this website called UCR World News, saying that Umi Mwalimu, who's a minister for health, among other things, in Tanzania, saying that she had tested positive for COVID-19. But this entire tweet is fake because there's no record of this tweet on her account. And then on the same day that this tweet was posted, there were pictures of the minister visiting a hospital and interacting with individuals. And at the time, this is still the case. The protocol is if you tested positive for COVID-19, you would have to go into quarantine. So you can't have someone who is tested positive going around and interacting with the public. But because a lot of people had not really gotten any information about COVID-19 in Tanzania at this point, this became an item of speculation where people were saying that the reason why the government was hesitant was because a lot of government officials had COVID-19. So you have a fake account on a website that you don't really know, but because a lot of people are willing to share it without checking to verify it. So in this case, if you actually went to the minister's Twitter account, you would see that this wasn't the case, and there's no tweet like this on her account. And then even if you look at the time when the tweet was posted, 5:34 a.m., and that's quite early. And because a lot of the minister's Twitter activity tends to be during the day, so after, let's say, after 8 a.m., and a lot of the tweets on her account tended to be official and related to her work. So that was another thing that sort of became a red flag. So because people are able to create things like these, you can actually go on the code at the back end of Twitter and sort of type anything you want on any Twitter account and then take a screenshot, and it looks legitimate. So that's one of the things that people have done to create and manipulate statements by public figures to create misinformation. And then this one is a scam where you have a lending company basically posting on a Facebook page saying that they were now offering services through this mobile number. So Tala had actually suspended operations in Tanzania, I think it was in 2018. But we've seen a number of pages come up saying that Tala has resumed operations, and then asking people to send money to a number or to an account, or trying to get people to basically part with their money. So we've seen a lot of instances like this where people will take the name and the image of a popular lender or popular company and try to push a certain message which is intended to deceive the public. And then this one is the same instance, but it uses the image of a celebrity, saying that she was offering her fans free laptops. And a lot of times we've seen people set up fake pages which impersonate celebrities, and then they either ask you to take certain actions, like comment using one letter at a time, and then you need to make a full word for you to win a certain prize. So by doing this, they're trying to increase the visibility of these posts and trying to get people to engage with the page in a way that gets them to, or that promises that they're going to get a reward. But even if you were successful and you sent a message to the page telling them I've successfully commented, they would then like block you, or they'd create another page with another type of post, and then they just move on and create these things over and over again and trying to engage with people the same type of way. And then this is another one where it's actually a newsroom, a TV station that was being impersonated, saying that 4 people had died of COVID-19 in Zanzibar. And this was back in May. And there hadn't been any deaths reported in Tanzania due to COVID-19 at the time. But this message actually went viral. A lot of people were sharing it on a lot of different platforms. We saw people sending us WhatsApp messages saying that we've gotten this message, is it true? And because we don't really have access to some of these messaging platforms, so messages like these tend to circulate. So we're only seeing like a very small fraction of the false information that circulates on these platforms. But a lot of times they tend to hijack like trending topics or things that a lot of people are talking about to try to increase the visibility of these pages. And then they start pushing ads, and then they start making revenue, because you can go to an advertiser and tell them, I have a page with 10,000 likes. So are you willing to advertise on this page? And then because of that, we've seen lots of instances where people tend to post and publish misleading information like this. And because the credible entities and organizations like the government, for example, are really slow to respond to things like these, because sometimes they don't have visibility, sometimes they don't have the resources. So it's up to individual journalists in a lot of times to respond to these messages and say, this is fake, this is what the actual facts are. And then it becomes really difficult, because it's something that you have to do continuously to engage with people and to tell them the message is fake or something like that. And then this is another one saying that in May that Tanzania had almost 16,500 COVID-19 cases. And if you look at the page, it says BBC Tanzania. And there's actually no Facebook page that says BBC Tanzania. It's actually BBC Swahili. And this was, so they're telling you to get more accurate information like this on the page. So it's someone who's hijacking a very big and very prominent media brand and then creating a page around it, because they're taking advantage of the fact that there's no similar page that exists. So it's really difficult for someone who sees this and then who doesn't really understand exactly what the BBC page or the BBC's online presence looks like. If they saw this, they would think, yes, this is a story from the BBC, which says that almost 1,300 Tanzanians have died from COVID-19. So elections generally tend to be really big targets of disinformation because of the fact that there's a lot of information that's flowing, and a lot of times we see literally everyone has something to say about it. So if you have an opinion about a certain candidate, you will try to share that opinion online. If you have a certain message that you want to spread, you will go online and then you will share that message. And if there's people who agree with you, even though that information might be false, they'll still be very likely to share it. Because there's a lack of a prevailing counter narrative of factual information. And then the other thing that we've seen, this is from our experience with looking at various elections in different places, elections can undermine institutions. So in the case of Kenya, we saw a lot of times the false information tended to focus on prominent individuals in the electoral commission. So you have people saying, oh, the chairman has died, or that the CEO has been arrested, or things like those. And also the credibility of individuals, where people say certain things about the people involved in the whole process, or even we saw a story saying that Tundu Lissu is Kenyan, which would make him ineligible to run for president in Tanzania. And so false information in these situations tries to attack the character of certain people and say certain things about them. And then it also tries to derail a legitimate process. So you have an election which is meant to run smoothly, but then if the Electoral Commission has to stop every time there's a big fake story circulating, they would spend more time debunking and fighting these false claims than they would trying to deliver a credible and fair election. And then also perpetuating stereotypes. Like we've seen situations where people will say certain things about individuals or tribes, or saying certain things. Like if you look at things that trend, for example, people saying certain things about certain communities, and they use false information to spread it. And then these things become repeated over and over again to the point where they actually, people start taking them to be fact and taking them to be credible. So by perpetuating these stereotypes, the character of certain individuals also becomes maligned, and then it ultimately leads to the undermining of all of these things, institutions, individuals, and legitimate processes. So responding to misinformation needs a certain strategy. So you need to, first of all, understand the nature of the false information. Is it a YouTube video which states that, let's say, a certain candidate has died? And why are people sharing this information? And sometimes you might look at it and think that this is fairly benign, like it doesn't really contribute to any harm or any damage. But the thing is, if you have a lot of these stories sort of come up over and over again, and they're taking away the trust that people have in the media, in the government, in lots of institutions, eventually people become apathetic. And that's one really dangerous consequence of the spread of misinformation and disinformation. Because you have lots of people saying that, after all, we can't trust the government because I heard certain things about them, and then this is false information that could have been debunked in time, but then it wasn't. And then mainstream media is also losing influence. So it's good to see that there's some mainstream journalists, there's some online journalists. I've seen Maxence from Jamii Forums here as well. And people are getting more of their information from forums like Jamii Forums or platforms like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And mainstream media is becoming like, they're playing second fiddle. They have to keep catching up with all of these things, all of these trends and developments. And as a result, what is happening is these online platforms become really big in terms of spreading false information, because there's money to be made on these platforms. There isn't as much money available because someone actually mentioned the fact that journalists, I think it was Kajubi, who mentioned that there isn't enough to make sure that journalists are doing their job to the best of their ability. So you have sources who are planting stories and manipulating the narrative to such an extent that trust in the media becomes undermined. So if you know that if you have, like, let's say, a really good story, and then you want to publish it, but then someone approaches you and tells you, here's a certain amount of money for you to just not tell that story, and then look at the money you're getting, you look at the salary you're getting as a journalist, it becomes like, do I stick to my guns and hope for a good outcome, or do I kill the story and take this money and put it in my pocket and just keep quiet? So journalism as a profession has sort of had to play catch up, because there's not the revenues that used to be there previously aren't as serious, and there's more money to be made online by publishing fake stories on YouTube videos and then monetizing these videos, or creating blogs and planting ads on these blogs and then pushing false information to make sure that it goes viral, compared to just what used to be there in terms of revenue from advertising and sales. And there's a lot of different voices, lots of people saying lots of different things around elections, around what the government is doing, around all of these different things. So it becomes essential for you to check and verify as a journalist. But at the same time, you ask yourself, like, are people actually consuming this factual information, or are you just shouting into the wind? So one of the things that we did, because when I joined PesaCheck in 2017, just before the elections we had in that year. And one of the things that we tried to do was to establish a partnership with an election monitoring NGO called the Election Observation Group. So what ELOG has is a network of observers. So anytime we saw like a potentially fake story around a certain individual or within a certain location, we were able to call the observer in this location and ask them, have you seen this? Have you heard this? And then if they had, then they would confirm it. If they hadn't, they'd say, let me go check and then get back to you. And then they would soon get back to us with the credible information, and we were able to debunk any false claims around the election that was circulating on social media. And because of that, because of the robust network of observers, we were able to use this in a way that helped us fight the spread of false information around elections. So it's important for you to identify who you want to work with and where they are, and how you can use these networks and these individuals to fight any potentially false information and become a resource. And then social media and messaging platforms have become really vital in terms of, keeping track of what people are saying or what people are talking about during elections. And you need to monitor these platforms. You can't ignore them, because a lot of times they're just a manifestation of what people are talking about offline. So you need to make sure that as you're keeping track of what people are saying, you're able to respond quickly, and you're able to like ask them if someone shares a video or a photo saying this, for example, has happened, let's say in Mbeya, and you ask them, where did you get this information? And then you try to establish where and when and how that particular piece of information was captured. So that is essentially the very first step of you trying to fact check information. And then, yeah, combining all of these things, combining observation and working with partners who are based or who have a network that you can tap into, and then also using your audience as an avenue to verify information. So asking people, we've seen this thing, people say this thing has happened in this location. If you're there, are you able to confirm it for us? If not, do you know someone who can? So you're basically able to tap your audiences and tell them, please help us verify this information quickly. So these are the things, when you're trying to fact check, the things that you're trying to establish. Provenance is the earliest instance of the information being shared. So you're able to go in and see that if it's a video, you can do, as Vincent showed, a reverse image search, and it'll show you if an image has been published online, if it's been previously shared or anything like that. And then you also need to check and make sure that you're looking at the original instance. So sometimes people will take screenshots, sometimes people will like retweet and then quote tweet, and then it becomes really hard to establish exactly when this thing started, but it's possible for you to establish like when the first instance of that piece of information was created, and then the source, who is it that created that information. That's where you're able to see when where the original piece of content is from. And when was it created? Because we've seen old information pop up and people say that this is a new instance of this information. And then location as well. Are you able to identify where this information is from? So if it's an image and then you see, for example, road signs in Arabic, or if it's a picture and you see people driving on the right, then you can probably tell that that's not in Tanzania or in Kenya or anywhere like that. So using these available clues and available evidence, you're able to start the verification process. So this isn't definitive. This doesn't show you whether or not this information is true, but it's a really useful starting point. And then the motivation, because sometimes people will share content because they want to achieve a certain goal. Sometimes they just share it because someone has sent it to them. And you find that a lot of times people will try to manipulate you, and they'll send you something and they'll tell you this is a really useful piece of information. But when you look at it, when you critically examine it, you'll see that it's not usable, it's not useful, it's not relevant. But if you try to understand the motivation of the creation of the post or the sharing of the post, that's a really good way for you to determine what sort of response you can you can start. So these are it's a very abridged version of the 5 W's and the H that journalists are meant to ask. But then when you want to identify potentially false information, you look at who produced it. So real information is provably true. If someone sends you a voice, an audio clip of me, and I'm saying certain things, and then you listen to it, and they tell you that this was recorded at this particular time, you can reach out to me and ask me, did you say these things at this time? And if it's the same for videos, same for links, same for audio. And you're able to prove it if it's actually true. And then also, where you need to figure out where it's from and who the original source is. And you need to try to find out who it's from before you use it in a story. So you can't really rely on this phenomenon that a lot of people call forwarded as received. So this is someone trying to say that, well, I just got this information from somewhere and I'm sharing it because I think it's useful. So that you shouldn't be the person who's forwarding this information and saying, well, I just received it, I thought it was useful. What claims does it make? If it's a primary claim, it should have evidence. So if someone says, let's say there's been an accident on this road and they send you a picture, then you need to dig deeper and find out, did this actually happen? You can call the police, for example, and ask them, we've seen this situation, is it true? And if it's a fact, it can be verified. That's the important bit. And then where was it published? So I've shown you a couple of instances where people created fake Facebook pages impersonating ITV and the BBC. And we've also seen instances where people have created entirely fake websites impersonating people like the Tanzania breweries, trying to get people to apply for jobs. And reputable publishers will contain information that lets you determine who they are. So you have news websites that have a contact us page, which has a physical address, or you have, if they don't have a physical address, they probably have an email address that you can send in, you can send queries to. And then when was it published? Because it's important to determine the time. So this you can figure out using things like reverse image search, which shows you the earliest instance of a piece of content being published, or even you can also see if it's been published before and someone is trying to say that this is something that's just happened. And if it's breaking news, if it's a breaking news situation, which we're likely to have a lot of during elections, you need to be extra careful. So you need to consider the source, you need to read beyond the headlines, because headlines can be very deceitful. Like you saw in the instance with the video that says that Tundu Lissu has died, but if you actually look at the video, it doesn't say anything about this particular instance. You check on the author, try to find out who they are. And then does it have supporting evidence? You also need to check the date, if you're able to determine the date when it was published. Sometimes we've seen satire and satirical content being shared by people thinking that it's true and it's credible. And because a lot of times you have people trying to make fun of certain situations, and they create like a satirical post, and then people will start thinking that this is credible and actual news, especially if the information about the source has been taken out. And then you also need to check your biases, because biases tend to lead to people falling for false information, because these things are saying something that you believe in, or that you think is true. And then you also need to ask the experts. As Vincent mentioned, fact checkers are available on request to answer any questions you might have. So if you have something that you need to be verified, you can reach out to us, you can reach out to Africa Check, you can reach out to any of the other organizations who are part of the International Fact Checking Network, and we'll be able to help you to determine whether the information you're seeing is true or not. And you can use that either for yourself, or you can publish it and share it as a story. So finally, you need to question everything, because so according to Abraham Lincoln, don't believe everything you read on the internet just because there's a picture with a quote next to it. And I'm finishing my presentation with a bit of fake news. And yeah, that's my time. Thank you.
I was muted there. I think that happens to all of us at some stage throughout every day these days. Yeah, they say it's the quote of 2020 is "you're muted." So thanks so much, Eric. Much appreciated. I see there are a few questions in the Q&A section, but I just want to quickly ask you a question, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. What is the single most important thing that our guests should remember when covering or fact-checking the upcoming election? Is there one specific thing that they should never forget while doing that?
So I'd say the one thing you shouldn't forget is just make sure that you have all of your facts ready. Like anything you say might just treat it as a potential for questioning, or for someone asking, like, what do you mean? Do you have any evidence to show for it? So just as much as possible, you need to exercise your journalistic rigor, and you need to make sure that everything has been checked and double-checked and triple-checked, so that you're not leaving any openings for misinterpretation, or that you're not sharing any false information.
Okay, thank you. I see Daniel. Just so that all the attendees can see the question that Daniel asked. Vincent has responded, but Daniel asked, in terms of strategy of fighting misinformation, how can fact checkers work with governments to counter malicious production and distribution of fake news? He says, I find it a dilemma because many governments in Africa are likely to use campaigns to counter vices like fake news, to also maliciously muzzle freedom of expression. And then Vincent responded, and you can all see that in the group chat, that one of the most effective things to do is for journalists to fact check claims themselves and call out misinformation. This shows that that the media is serious about accuracy and maintaining high standards of accuracy. Okay, just before we continue, I would just like to check, Vincent or Eric, do you have any further examples, fact-checking examples to discuss with everyone, or can we move on to all the questions and answers?
Hello, I have one or two things I'd like to show. So about fact-checking elections. So one of the best tools that that political parties usually do during an election is a manifesto. Usually what happens is, if it's very important to note that if a government gets elected on a bad manifesto, then they're going to spend their term trying to do bad things when they're in office. They're going to spend their time doing wrong, implementing policies they should not implement. And also, if the manifesto has exaggerated claims, then they are going to win votes on the basis of falsehood. So one of the most important things to do is to check whatever manifesto the government is putting out and the promises that they make in there. And over the years, one of the things that Africa Check has done is rigorously check the manifestos of political parties. I'm going to share my screen in a moment for you to see. So one of the things that we have, for example, is what we did in the lead up to the election was we fact-checked both the governing party, both the Jubilee Manifesto. I don't know if you can see my browser. You can see there the Jubilee Party Manifesto, 5 claims fact-checked, right? And so what these are the actual documents, and in every claim, so for example, you can see we have achieved a halving of the number of deaths of children under 5 years, and we checked it and found it incorrect, right? So that is not true. And what we found was that, for example, 2016 data by the Ministry of Health shows the current mortality rate was 52 per 1,000 live births. For under 5 deaths to have halved, the current rate would have to be about 26 deaths per 1,000 live births. So we check what they say. In this case, and we have a verdict. So our verdict is here, it's incorrect. You can keep going further. So for instance, in the last 4 years, we have connected an additional 15,137 public primary schools. So this is a claim about electricity. So they're saying we have connected all these people to the grid. And when we look at the information available, you can see that all the sources, this is how Africa Check does fact checks. You can see they're meticulously hyperlinked. Every little source that we have read is meticulously hyperlinked. But right at the bottom here, you can see Africa Check unsuccessfully tried to contact the Electrification Authority to clarify the numbers. We also could not find independent data to corroborate official numbers. In the absence of this, we rate this claim as unproven. So this is very important. As a fact checker, you are not claiming to know everything. And in situations where government is not giving you information, then you tell your readers exactly what we have done here. You tell them the steps you took to try to get the information and the fact that the government did not give it to you. And then you come out and say unproven. So there is no evidence, right? So you have checked and there is no evidence. Here's another one. In the last 4 years, we have increased power generation and added 675 megawatts to the grid, and we say exaggerated, right? So what we found when we checked that, we found that, it has risen, but it has not exceeded 576 megawatts, okay? So that is the kind of thing we do for that's the kind of thing we do for a manifesto. So this was the Jubilee Party manifesto. So this was the party that was in government, okay? And then for the opposition party, we did the exact same thing. So fact-checked 5 claims in Kenya NASA opposition manifesto. So the exact same thing. So they come and say foreign debt has increased twofold, mostly correct. Only half the children who complete primary school are proceeding to secondary school. That is a very big claim, right? So they finish primary school and then half of them drop out. That's a very big claim. So we looked at these numbers and we found Form 1 transition figures for 2015, 2014, 2013 are 81.9%, 76.1%, and 70% respectively. So how do we know that these numbers are correct? These reports have to have been produced long before the election happened, right? That's what gives these things a measure of credibility. If they were being produced, if we were reading this from a government portal that I told you about that was produced around the time of the election, then we would have ability to doubt these figures. But here we have people saying one thing, and the official sources that have been there for a long time are saying something else. Then here we have another one. Close to 250,000 children who complete primary school are not completing secondary school. So this is understated. Why is it understated? Because the problem is even worse, right? The problem is even worse. So we found that 34%, 37%, and 38%, right? So a quarter is what? 25%. So the problem is actually worse. And sometimes you can see mostly correct. So this claim about maize, mostly correct. Holiday tourist arrivals have declined, mostly correct, right? So this is very important to check manifestos. And when we are doing fact checking, we're not writing a fact check like a news story. The aim of a fact-checking report is clarity. So we want the public to understand exactly where we got our information and how we came to our conclusion. That's the most important thing. So in order to do that, not only do we make the verdict very clear, like this, correct, we say why, and we hyperlink everyone. So the National Super Alliance, the party, the manifesto is there, it's uploaded. You can see every other source of information that you have, everything you refer to has to be hyperlinked so that the public can check for themselves and verify what you did. When you're doing fact checking, you are exposing yourself to public scrutiny, yourself, and they have to be able to evaluate your work as a fact checker. So that's very, very, very important. So one of the things that Africa Check has done is called the promise tracker. So for the parties in government, we do this. We rate the promises. So this one is not yet assessed. This is the key, not yet assessed, broken, stalled, in the works, and kept. So for example, within 5 years, put 1 million acres under modern irrigation. It's still in the works. So what this means is that we have looked at how many acres they put under irrigation, and we found, yes, they're making some progress. They're making some progress. So we say in the works. Target 7 to 10% growth in the first 2 years, right? But the economy in the first 2 years grew 4.5%, right? 5.9%, 5.4%. So this is broken. So we say the promise is broken. Raise transition rate to 90% from primary to secondary, again in the works. That means there's something happening there. Increase national budget from 15 to 40% within the next 5 years. This one has been kept. So we've looked at the money and we've seen that, yes, they have increased the percentage of the budget. Increase police citizen ratio from 1 to 1,050 to a ratio of 1,800 citizens within 5 years, again, kept. So we've looked at how many people they've hired, we've compared it to the way the population is growing, and there is evidence that they have kept their promise, right? Increase the paved road network from 11,000 to 24,000 in 5 years, in the works. So a lot of times when we see something like this in the works, so they are doing something, but even if we don't know exactly how much they have built, we can't verify, but we know they've built something. So in a way, this is a way of judging a claim and saying, we don't know exactly where you were, so we leave it in the works until we can clarify for sure. Increase number of foreign tourists, in the works, right? So this is what we do for manifestos. So the party that is in government, you can actually check all the promises one by one. So for example, as the Tanzanian election draws near, you could have one like this for CCM, and you look at the promises they made in 2015, and you check 1, 2, 3, 4, all right, and see what they have done. one of the things that tends to happen when you look at promises made by politicians is to look at the number of when you look at promises they make, often they are very, very, very they're very, detail oriented. One of the things the politicians always take for granted is they actually think you won't check. This is something that we did not believe that was true, but many of them don't check. They don't think you will check. So when you do check, it has a big impact. So I would absolutely encourage people to check and see. And I want to play a video to end with, Karina. I think that I need to bring it up, but I want to show what live fact checking on TV looks like. So I'm going to play the video and what I'm going to do, maybe, I don't know if Kajubi could answer one or two questions while I bring it up or something of the sort, but I think it is a fitting video to show how powerful fact checking can be. Maybe I can stop at that point.
Thanks so much, Vincent. While you're getting that ready, I see that there have been quite some movement in our Q&A channel or function or box or whatever you call it. So let's quickly go to, there is a question from Najma Juma. And Kajubi, I think you might be the best person, or you will definitely be the best person to answer this, as it's about the Tanzania Media Council. But Najma is asking, what happens when a media outlet is favoring a certain party and does it so openly, even by being biased to opposition? We don't see these media being blocked by the government. And she's asking, what is the role of the Tanzania Media Council on this?
Yes, there is an echo.
We're not hearing it. I don't know about the other panelists or everyone. If there is anyone who's also hearing the echo, please just indicate that in the group chat, and then we can try again. But Kajubi, I think you're fine.
Okay. We have issued guidelines about coverage of the elections this year, but the guidelines, there are similar guidelines also issued by the National Electoral Commission and the Zanzibar Electoral Commission. And in short, all the guidelines require the media to provide equitable coverage. Of course, the onus is even more on the public media, the public-funded media, but basically all media are required to provide equitable coverage. And we say equitable coverage because we know there is no way you can have equal coverage because the final decision lies with the editor, and it depends on newsworthiness of material that he has or she has. For example, if you have a political party which has 50 candidates, 50 parliamentary candidates, and you have another which has only 5, you do not expect the coverage to be equal. Now, what can the Media Council do? We are a voluntary organization, and we do not have powers to take punitive measures as such. But that is in the hands of the government. Unfortunately, the government regulators, how should I put it? More often than not, do not take action against media outlets if these media outlets are deemed to be in favor of the party in power. And of course, that is very unfortunate. So in our case, we will engage and we continue to engage with the editors and even the media owners to discuss these issues and to show why it is important that the election be treated not as a single party election, but as a multi-party election, and why it's important for all the contestants to be covered. Yeah.
Thanks, Kajubi. Najma, I'm sure that answered your question. There was another question from Prosper saying, and Eric has already started answering it in the question and answer section, but perhaps there's something somebody would like to add. Prosper asked, when reading a lot of fake news or information on social media, I think we have to discuss who is a journalist and can a real journalist be found on social media in East Africa, and what should be done to control mobile journalism, where we see a lot of propaganda and fake news. He asked for input on that. Just to go to Eric's answer quickly, Eric then said, I think that anyone who shares information can and should be treated as a journalist. There are lots of platforms where people share primary information, and by doing so, they are doing the work of a journalist or a newsroom. However, there is a need to make sure that this information is credible, which is where fact-checking comes in. We try to check the things people post and say without amplifying the false information further. So so both PesaCheck and Africa Check also does fact-checking on Facebook. So we do, and that is how we contribute to fighting the spread of false information on Facebook. Eric or Vincent, is there anything else you'd like to add there? I think Eric has answered it, but if there's anything else.
Yes, I think that when it gets to one of the things that a media council or regulatory organization can do is to speak out publicly about what the situation is. So if there is misinformation, one of the things they can do is speak out and say, yes, that in this article, such and such a newspaper did misinform the public. And one of the things that the Media Council of Kenya does is they run a magazine, and in that magazine, they evaluate critically the publication. So they publish every month, they will publish it, and in each they will say it's targeted at the journalists, and they will say in this story and that story, the media, this particular story, fell short in this way and that way and this way and that way. So so that way, the public also gets to know what is expected. Because I think that when you have situations like we have, where journalists don't want to, certain journalists are affiliated with certain parties or certain owners, it gets a bit difficult where you have a very small ecosystem. The best situation is where you have very many journalists and they are all reporting on each other. So that because what tends to happen even here, people don't want to, if I'm working for a certain newspaper, I don't want to criticize another newspaper because we all think that we are working in the same industry. The industry is very small. Maybe you don't want to ruin your chances for working for another newspaper. So there is a lack of criticism. So what you need to do is foster that community of criticism where people can talk frankly about how the news is being covered. And if journalists are self-critical, if they're criticizing themselves, then that helps raise the standard of work, as opposed to a situation where no one wants to criticize each other. And that means that bad journalism is not criticized, and the public and the government can see there is bad journalism, and that may incentivize the government to step in and then take advantage of that situation to step on media freedoms and freedom of expression.
Thanks. Yes.
I'm ready to play the video now.
Okay, great. I was about to say or ask. So over to you again, Vincent, with the video that you wanted to show everyone.
Okay. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to back it up slightly so that we get an idea. So this is after the 2017 election, and so this discussion was about the Electoral Commission, and you have two representatives of the parties that were contesting the election, and they're having a live interview in the studio. So let's listen in.
The presidency is a ticket. It is a ticket between the president and his deputy. And if the president, for some reason, cannot attend, the deputy is quite capable of representing him. And he has not failed. Anytime they have called, he has not failed to attend.
Okay. Otiende, will Raila attend the meeting if it's called by the chair?
Candidate Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta has never attended any meeting called by the IEBC. Raila Amolo Odinga has attended all meetings called by the IEBC. If the IEBC calls such a meeting, and if the discussion is how do we conduct proper, legitimate, and credible election away from 26, definitely we'll attend.
All right, I want to just ask you one final one, David, because initially you talked about Commissioner Kombe having committed a crime by being a commissioner of dual citizenship. Well, Article 73(8) says a state officer or member of the Defense Forces shall not hold dual citizenship.
Right.
But that the clause does not apply to judges and members of commissions. So what law were you referring to?
I'm referring to the deceit and the dishonesty where your loyalties are divided, where if you are Kenyan, you would actually not do what she did.
But it's not a crime according to the law. She may have dual citizenship, but is allowed to be a member of a commission such as the IEBC.
It verges on
it's
deception.
Just that you said it was a crime in the beginning.
I have my own page which I will also look at. But I want to ask our friend here before he leaves. So they're determined that the election does not happen on the 26th.
Okay, that's it. So this is an election. So these are very influential, powerful politicians, and you can see the journalist in the chair. What she has done is she has noted that a politician has made a claim, right? So the politician has made a claim, and what she has done is she has noted that that claim has been made. And then you can see towards the end of the show, she says, by the way, that thing you said earlier, it's not right. It was about the Constitution, and she reads out the relevant chapter, and she says that to be a part of an independent commission is not a crime, because this gentleman had said that it was a crime. So I wanted to show you this example of live TV fact-checking. And this is very important in situations where you have influential, powerful politicians saying things that are not true. This is how you can hold them to account. And this is very challenging to pull off, because this was live TV. So to do it in the same program is very difficult. If you can't do it like this, the other thing you can do, if you're having another episode of the program, you can revisit this issue and say that, this man said X, but the truth is actually Y. So Karina, that's the video that I wanted to show. Thank you.
Thanks, Vincent. What a great example of live fact-checking against deadlines. Yeah, and I think sometimes you have to sort of work as a team also in order to get that right. But it just shows shows you that even against time or with a lot of time pressure, we can do fact-checking in our day-to-day reporting. Just a comment from Razaya, as there's a comment to support Kajumbi. It's a complex issue because some political parties have more power and leverage and own multiple media outlets and give maximum coverage to their candidates, and there is nothing anyone can do. And then the best the council can do and has done is to make sure journalists are trained to analyze candidates, parties, and the election commission to report what is right and wrong, giving critical analysis and to help people make informed decisions. Yes, so that thanks for sharing that, Razaya. And then I see Daniel has his hand raised, and there's a question from him asking, is there a reverse kind of check for audio information? For example, the voice notes shared on WhatsApp. Vincent or Eric, can you take that one? How do we go about fact-checking WhatsApp? WhatsApp voice notes.
So WhatsApp is very hard to crack in terms of fact-checking, but there's ways that we've tried to sort of get the information from the platform and try to fact-check it. So one of the things we've done is we've launched a newsletter where we send out a summary of the fact checks that we've been doing. And then also, one of the things that we ask people to do is to send us the false claims that they see on the platform so that we can fact check and respond to them and tell them we've looked into what you've sent us and this is what we found. And then the other thing that we're trying to do is to so the newsletter essentially proactively shares fact checks, but because that's not enough, we can't really fact check everything that's out there. So by giving people a channel to send us the potentially false information, then we're able to try to respond as quickly as we can to this. And then also trying to engage with people who can take the newsletter as is and then forward it into the various groups they're in. So trying to get people to engage with us on that platform is really important.
Vincent?
Okay, in terms of check for audio information, just to try and answer the question head on, if the day they have a technology that can do an online search for audio clips, we'll be on it. We'll be on it. We can't do that right now. No, nobody can do that right now. Even with video, the best we can do at the moment is take a screenshot of the video and then search for the search, do a reverse image search for the picture. So there are some limitations. So yeah, we can't put an audio clip and search Google for it and find all the other audio clips at the moment. We are really waiting for the day that will happen. So so right now, I would say that we are dealing with WhatsApp. Very much like what Eric said. I mean, what we try to do is to create community. So we reach out to people, we tell them, here's how you can reach us. Here's how you can send us. So we have a WhatsApp line, a WhatsApp phone, and everybody knows the number. So we usually just broadcast the number widely. Everybody knows our number, they know how to reach us. And so when you use that WhatsApp number, you send a claim there. You send all the stories that your auntie and your grandmother and all your relatives and all your friends are sending you. You send them to that phone, right? And everybody knows that phone is there. And then we respond to those people. So by responding to those people, we begin to build a community of fact-checking. And we also try to appreciate them. So we don't just publish it, but we say that Kajubi sent us this, right? So when we are publishing the check, we say, Kajubi sent us this, we have checked it, here we go. In addition to responding personally to him, right? So that helps people to, that appreciation helps to build community, and people feel that they can engage in that space with WhatsApp. And then obviously, we obviously are trying at any one time to grow the number of groups we are in. So we are trying to circulate as much as possible to grow our tentacles, so that people we're not exactly waiting for people to send claims to our official WhatsApp phone, but we're also trying to to be in as many groups as possible, to look as, in many groups as possible, so that we are also monitoring the space. You actually have to monitor the space proactively and do surveillance. And do surveillance so that we get as much as possible.
Thanks, Vincent. So we also have that. So the WhatsApp service that Vincent was describing for our Kenya office, we also have a similar service in South Africa, and it's aptly called What's Crap on WhatsApp. Excuse my language, but and we use this model because we don't necessarily have access to WhatsApp in the same way that we do have access to something that's on Twitter, to something that's on Facebook, to something that's on Instagram. So that's why we launched these WhatsApp services, so that people can contact us and make us aware of the false information that they receive on their mobile phone. And then what we also do is we have a short broadcast an audio clip that we also share with the followers on WhatsApp to go through some of the claims that we have received and that we have fact checked. So that's a very successful way that we found to address false information spreading on WhatsApp. And since it is a very big problem across Africa, and we've seen it now with COVID-19, that a lot of the false information that we have to deal with and that we see is actually spread via WhatsApp. Okay, I don't see any further questions. Yes.
Maxence has left, he says, on the chat, but he had asked a very important question that I think we need to deal with, which is, he had said that they published a promise tracker, or they fact-checked the CCM manifesto, but it was used against them. Now, this is very important, because obviously, if you have governments intervening in such a fashion, then there is probably it's probably going to be a problem. And I think, as Kajubi said, there is going to be a fear that government will do this to you, and so that will obviously affect what people do. I would say I'm not sure. I would have loved him to be here to talk about what exactly they did. It's unfortunate he's gone. I wanted him to talk about exactly what they did, so that maybe we can think about how in such situations we can fact check but still remain on the right side, right? Because we do want to avoid being inconvenienced, being arrested, being taken to court, all that. If we can avoid that, it's a good thing to avoid it. Obviously, sometimes, if you're trying to get to the truth and the truth is not in government statistics, then, that's just how the situation is. But I think that it's very, very important to see as many. One of the reasons why I was posting all the sources of information that I was posting in my presentation was to kind of give clues of where we might find official government information. Because if we fact check using official government information, then you are probably on a safer platform, right? So if a politician says one thing, but you tell him, but you see, the finance ministry published this, it's also official information, then you are probably on a safer platform because you're using official government statistics. So in as much as possible, if we can maximize the field of play within government statistics, that may be one solution in a situation like this. But I would really have wanted to talk about the situation he was in.
Okay, thanks so much. Then yeah, we have basically 1 minute left, but I just want to I just wanted to make sure that Eric or Kajubi doesn't have a final something to add before we don't, no pressure at all, just in case there's some final thoughts that you want to leave the participants with. I think Vincent has answered the one question that we missed. So I'll Eric or Kajubi, would you like to just make some closing remarks?
I just want to tell my colleagues here that, like I said, we are damned if we don't fact check. Probably we are damned if we fact check too with the present administration, but we really need to fact check. We really need to get our facts right. And like Vincent said, as much as we can fact check using government information, it will make us safer. And that's why I was insisting on the ability to multi-source. There are a lot of sources out there, a lot of official sources out there, which we can use and say, hey, this is the information, this is information coming from your own sources. So I hope we shall be able to cover this election to the end, and I wish everybody well, and I would like to see everybody live another day to cover another story. Thank you.
Okay, so I think one of the things I've learned about fact-checking in Tanzania is that there's a lot of variables, there's a lot of things that happen that tend to be beyond our control, and as much as possible, we've tried to overcome them. So, because we're feeling them from here, from Kenya, and I can just imagine what it feels like for the people actually on the ground doing the work. But yeah, I'm actually looking forward to seeing how this election plays out in terms of the way it's handled, and I hope that all of you have learned something from this presentation, and if you'd like any more pointers, we're available. Like I mentioned, Najma is in the chat, and she's doing a fantastic job trying to fact check as much as possible in Tanzania. And then also because the fact that this is such a new and growing space for fact checking and fact checkers, we're always looking out for people who have interesting ideas or things they'd like to implement. So if there's any way we can collaborate at PesaCheck with anyone, we're available, I'd say. And our contact information is on our site. The link to that is in my presentation. And then I'm looking forward to learning more about how we can better work in the country as well.
Thanks so much, Eric, and I think that goes for Africa Check as well. Get in touch with us. Get in touch with PesaCheck if you want any advice on fact checking, any advice on fact checking while you're working against tight deadlines as a journalist. We'll be in touch with you via email. To wrap up, I would just like to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I believe you found the discussion invaluable and that it provided you with what you need to cover and fact check the upcoming election. I would also like to extend my appreciation to the presenters. With your extensive knowledge and experience in the fields of fact checking and journalism, I believe that you've played a big role now in preparing our participants for the election. So a big thank you for that. Thanks also to Facebook who made this webinar possible, and the TriFacts team at Africa Check for the work behind the scenes. I'm going to share my screen with you again, and then I'll just share the contact details. Let me just share it. I think you can see the slide now. Wait. There you go. So the email address, trifacts@africacheck.org, and then you can also find us on social media on both Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Africa Check. Yeah, and if you have any questions or would like to get in touch with any of the panelists, you can use that email address, and I will put you in touch with them. We'll also be in touch regarding the presentations. Yes, so thanks very much for joining us, and all the best once again in the lead up to the elections. I hope you can use everything that you've learned today to report accurately, and also to fact check in the lead up and during the elections.